which is to the extent that anyone in this town or country should be held in criminal contempt, it is the Attorney General of the Department of Justice or the Deputy Attorney General or whoever within the Department of Justice is responsible at this point for violating the law, which requires millions of documents that the Department of Justice has refused to release without justification. In other words, there are more than 5 million documents within the Epstein files that the Department of Justice currently is under a legal obligation to share with the American people, consistent with the wishes of the brave, courageous Epstein survivors, and consistent with the law that Donald Trump signed. The Department of Justice was supposed to release those documents, 5 million documents, by December 19th. More than a month has passed. And the Republicans have shown no interest in actually compelling the Department of Justice to do what they are legally obligated to do at this period of time. That sounds to me like contempt.
This may look like a dispute over who should testify before Congress, but it's actually a stress test of whether accountability is applied evenly or selectively. What's really being tested here is the integrity of oversight power, whether it exists to uncover facts or to manufacture political pressure. This raises broader questions about how institutions enforce the law when compliance becomes inconvenient. In this video, we'll break down how a contempt vote reveals deeper cracks in congressional credibility, selective enforcement, and the real targets of accountability in Washington.
Thanks. Really active group today. Going back.
Thank you. Yesterday, 9 House Democrats voted with Republicans to hold former President Bill Clinton in contempt. Were you or your team trying to advise those members not to vote on contempt? And what is your position on whether the Clintons should be held in contempt?
I strongly support the position of Robert Garcia and Jamie Raskin, and have indicated that publicly, and also in my conversations with any member who has asked for my perspective on this issue before the committee. When it gets to the floor, if we need to have a broader caucus-wide conversation about it, we will. And my position remains unchanged, and it's the same position that is held by Robert Garcia, Jamie Raskin, Nancy Pelosi, and many others, which is to the extent that anyone in this town or country should be held in criminal contempt, it is the Attorney General of the Department of Justice or the Deputy Attorney General or whoever within the Department of Justice is responsible at this point for violating the law, which requires millions of documents that the Department of Justice has refused to release without justification. In other words, there are more than 5 million documents within the Epstein files that the Department of Justice currently is under a legal obligation to share with the American people, consistent with the wishes of the brave, courageous Epstein survivors, and consistent with the law that Donald Trump signed. The Department of Justice was supposed to release those documents, 5 million documents, by December 19th. More than a month has passed. And the Republicans have shown no interest in actually compelling the Department of Justice to do what they are legally obligated to do at this period of time. That sounds to me like contempt. And we should start there.
Do you think the Clintons have questions to answer for?
I think that the Clintons are working in good faith to try to reach an accommodation with the Oversight Committee in order to sit down and offer their testimony, which is part of the reason why, in my view, the effort by James Comer lacks any credibility, because it has always been congressional practice that if someone's under subpoena, you work to find a reasonable accommodation in order to receive their testimony. Now, James Comer subpoenaed more than 10 different individuals, and he's released every single one of those individuals, including 8 members of law enforcement, like Christopher Wray, the former FBI director, who was the FBI director when Jeffrey Epstein was in custody and ultimately killed himself. And Christopher Wray and all of these other individuals were able to say to the committee they had no information. Very similar statement that the Clintons made. And Christopher Wray and all of these other Trump administration officials were released from any obligation to show up. And yet James Comer demands, even in the midst of good faith negotiation, that the former president and the former Secretary of State and First Lady show up. Why? Why did he make that demand and treat them differently than every other person who was under the same subpoena, who were actually part of the Trump Justice Department when all of this stuff unfolded? And so, again, I share the same position that Robert Garcia and Jamie Raskin hold, and hopefully there'll be some resolution to this in the next week or so. But if Comer tries to bring this resolution, he wants to lock Hillary Clinton up, consistent with what Donald Trump's been saying now for 10 years, lock her up, as opposed to actually focusing on the things that matter for the American people, then we'll deal with it appropriately.
What we just witnessed was not a casual exchange or a passing comment. It was a moment where lines were drawn clearly, deliberately, and with purpose. In response to questions about a contempt vote involving a former president, Hakeem Jeffries did not hesitate. He redirected the focus not toward political theater, but toward what he framed as a deeper failure of accountability. His words were sharp, measured, and unmistakably intentional. In his view, the real issue was not who was being summoned, but who was refusing to comply with the law. Jeffries made his position plain. If contempt is to mean anything in Washington, it must apply first to power, not convenience. He argued that officials within the Department of Justice, including the Attorney General and senior leadership, have failed to meet a clear legal obligation. Millions of documents required by law to be released remain withheld without justification. Deadlines passed, explanations absent. And yet, according to Jeffries, the outrage in Congress has been selective, aimed downward rather than upward. This moment revealed something essential about how accountability functions in modern American government. The law, in theory, applies evenly. In practice, it is often enforced unevenly. Jeffries challenged that imbalance directly. He pointed out that Congress has the authority to compel compliance, yet chooses not to exercise it when doing so would require confronting powerful institutions. Instead, energy is redirected toward familiar political figures, where controversy is guaranteed and consequences are optional. The contrast he drew was deliberate. On one side, individuals who are, by his account, engaging in good faith negotiations with congressional committees, following long-established norms of accommodation and testimony. On the other, a federal department under explicit statutory obligation, missing deadlines and offering no transparent reason why. One group faces threats of contempt. The other faces silence. Jeffries reminded listeners that congressional oversight has always relied on negotiation, not spectacle. Subpoenas are not meant to be weapons. They are tools to obtain information. Historically, when witnesses engage and communicate, accommodations are reached. He noted that numerous individuals, including high-ranking officials from previous administrations, were released from their obligations after stating they had no relevant information. Those precedents mattered. And yet, according to Jeffries, those same standards were not being applied equally. By raising these comparisons, Jeffries exposed what he sees as a double standard embedded in the oversight process itself. Why, he asked, are some individuals granted flexibility while others are treated as exceptions? Why is the process bent to accommodate certain figures, but rigidly enforced against others? These were not rhetorical flourishes. They were questions aimed at the integrity of congressional authority. At its core, this exchange was not about personalities. It was about power and responsibility. Jeffries framed the issue as one of institutional courage. Congress, he suggested, must decide whether it exists to uphold the law or to generate headlines. Demanding accountability from those who are already engaging with the process may be politically satisfying, but it does little to restore public trust. Compelling transparency from institutions that resist it is harder, riskier, and far more consequential. This moment also revealed how political narratives are constructed. By invoking long-standing slogans and past grievances, Jeffries warned against allowing history to be recycled as distraction. He argued that revisiting old battles, rather than addressing current legal obligations, serves no one except those who benefit from delay. The American people, he implied, deserve better than symbolic conflict. They deserve clarity, transparency, and action. What made this exchange resonate was not its volume, but its focus. Jeffries did not shout. He did not evade. He laid out a framework that connected law, precedent, and moral responsibility. He placed the burden where he believes it belongs, on institutions entrusted with enforcing the law, not on individuals navigating its processes in good faith. In moments like this, the true test of a system becomes visible. Not when it is easy to enforce the rules, but when doing so challenges entrenched power. Not when accountability is popular, but when it is necessary. Jeffries' remarks served as a reminder that contempt, if it is to carry meaning, cannot be selective. It must confront resistance wherever it exists. This is the larger story unfolding beneath the headlines. A struggle over whether oversight is a tool for truth or a stage for spectacle. A question of whether laws are deadlines or suggestions, and a challenge to every institution involved. Will you enforce accountability evenly, or only when it is politically safe? The answer to that question will shape more than this debate. It will shape public faith in governance itself. Because when laws are ignored without consequence, cynicism grows. When power shields itself from scrutiny, trust erodes. And when accountability is delayed, justice feels distant. This is why moments like this matter, not because of who was mentioned, but because of what was demanded: consistency, transparency, responsibility. These are not partisan values. They are democratic ones, and they require vigilance. If you believe accountability should apply to everyone, not just the convenient targets, stay informed, stay engaged, and support independent coverage that follows the facts wherever they lead. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA. Support our work to expose the truth.